Well, good afternoon, friends. Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Story Time. Gosh, I love how stories connect us. Our stories, literally, many times in life, we feel like we have to hide them, we have to suppress them, or we think that they were just an event that we were so happy to have survived. But many times, what we find when we share them is that they truly become the keys to somebody else's freedom. So, with story time today, I get the privilege and the opportunity to interview a friend of mine who was also an author in the Pieces to Purpose journey. And I cannot wait for you to meet her. So, say hello to my friend Carrie. Carrie, welcome to
Thank
Story
you
Time.
so much. Finally, we're here.
Finally, we're here. Oh my gosh. Right after the launch of Pieces to Purpose, we were like, we're going to do this interview together and we're going to have fun sharing all the things. But before we get into that,
Yes.
I would love for you to take a moment and introduce yourself and tell them a little bit about who Carrie is.
Yes. I am Carrie Kass. For my professional introduction, I am the Director of Operations and Business Development for Center for Healing and Regenerative Medicine. Our acronym is CHARM. So it's very fitting for the type of medicine that we're in. We are in the musculoskeletal space, taking more of a holistic, comprehensive approach to using your body's own orthobiologics to heal your pain and injuries. And so I helped open the practice back in 2011, and I'm still there. And we are primed for some really exciting and major growth over the next few years. So, that keeps me pretty busy. In addition to that, I am also the community director for Ladies Lifestyle Network Austin. Ladies Lifestyle Network is a national group. I think we're well over 20 cities at this point. My friend Casey started LLN in Charlotte, North Carolina, I think a couple of years prior to COVID. And she kept it going strong. And Austin was the first launch city.
Yeah.
I knew Casey because she used to live in Austin and ran a similar type of networking group. And so she reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to be Austin's director and be the first launch city. So gently started that back in 2022, really got it up and running into 2023, and we're going strong now with that as well.
Yeah.
So in addition, I live in Lakeway with my husband, John. We're dinks, as people like to say. So no kids. No pets, but we sure like to have a good time. We love to travel. We love immersing ourselves in this great city of Austin. So you will often find us at restaurants and concerts. Any concert ticket I can get my hand on, I'm there. So ACL and South by Southwest are really
It's a busy week
kind of
for
our
you guys.
jam.
Yeah.
I know. Yes. So I'm really happy to be here. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think about all of the different areas that you contribute back into the world, and that's amazing, right? I mean, when you think about helping people with their health, one of our big pillars, right, in the Unbreakable Life journey, health is pillar number 5. But then pillar number 6 is community.
Yeah.
And community, without community, it is impossible to reach purpose. We can't come to the place of discovering and fulfilling our life's purpose if we don't have people that surround us and that support us and help us with that. So you're kind of in all of the different realms and out there making changes and sharing your beautiful story on stages. Carrie and I had the privilege to get to share a stage together this last weekend at a SHE event, and SHE stands for Savvy, Healthy, Empowered. Our friend Veronica Seaver launched that organization, and there's so many places that people are plugging in, and I feel like this is the time. Like right now, we are at this pivotal time in history where people are at this place of saying, why am I here? Like, what am I doing? What am I spending my time on? Where is my energy going? And am I adding value back into the world around me? Well, Carrie, I know for you, that's not a question because you're adding value everywhere that you go. And to our listeners today, I want you to think about yourself and where is your time being invested in the intentional things that you're going to pick up. So, because Carrie and I are going to dig into the book here in a moment, and I love, we have known each other for I don't know, a year and a half maybe now.
Yeah, I think so.
I think the first time I officially met Carrie was at the Unbreakable Women's Conference. And I saw her in the audience. I'm like, I don't know who that is, but she looks amazing. I have to meet her. And so at the end of the event, I came up and said hi and found out you were in Boss Babes. And I just didn't even know it yet.
I know.
And so it's an honor to get to know you. But through that journey of us spending time together, we co-authored a book together.
Yes, we did.
Which is amazing. And our stories were kind of similar. Like, it's incredible. And I think that's one thing that, we talk about story time. And a lot of times for people, we hide our stories. We just pretend they don't exist. We move on. We just push through. We act like everything is normal, or we create a new normal and surround the story and then kind of bury the story, right? And in your situation and in mine, it's so interesting to see how similar it was, even almost to the title. Like, mine was, take back your power, but through the whole story, I talked about let your light shine. And yours was the dimmer switch, right?
Yes.
So before I go into similarities, I would love for you to talk a little bit about how that general theme came up about not letting the dimmer go out in your life.
Honestly, the title just kind of came to me as I was thinking about, what I was going to write. And when the opportunity got presented to me, my joke to myself was like, well, there's a lot of pieces that kind of get to the purpose. So how am I going to kind of define that and delineate that? And I remember talking to Michelle, and she was like, write about all of it. I'm like, okay, I only have this much space, right? So
4,000 words is not a lot, right?
No, it is really hard. And it did, once I vomited it out, it was quite lengthy. And so it took some time to, go back through, because I wanted all the points to be there and I wanted to make it flow. So, getting the opportunity to share that story. And it's funny that you said, we tend to kind of reinvent ourselves and bury the story and keep moving forward. And if you've read my chapter or not, that's exactly what I did. It was kind of like, you are not going to dim the light on me, right? I'm not going to allow that to happen. But in order to do that, I had to keep just kind of moving past things and not really confronting them or dealing with them in the moment. And certainly, things caught up later in life, and whether, just feelings about things or paths that I chose, probably based on kind of shoving that stuff down and just being like, we're not ever going to talk about that again. We're not going to deal with that. This is more of a safe place and making safer choices.
Right.
And, as I got older and kind of things happened, it just all evolved and just made me realize, like, everybody has a story to share.
Right.
And I felt finally at a point where, like, I had so many people say to me, look like you really have your life together. You have a career, you're running this group, you have got a great husband. And I'm like, I do, but first of all, it's not perfect. And, despite what it looks like on the outside, nothing is perfect. And there's a lot of crap underneath, that kind of led up and built to get to this point. And I think everybody needs to see that, because they're, whether you're looking at celebrities or friends or family or whatever, there's this illusion that, oh, well, they've just had it so good and so easy.
Right.
And it's not necessarily the case. And I didn't want to portray this fake illusion about myself. And, yes, I have worked hard on myself and on my career and being a driver and making certain changes in life, but it didn't come without work. It didn't come without heartache. It didn't come without struggle. It didn't come without sadness. It didn't come out, without this and this and this.
Right.
And I think that just makes it relatable to people. And, I just know that so many people have that same thing inside of them. And I think I said this at the She Conference, is not everyone will necessarily get to a point to write a chapter in a book or speak on a stage or be on a podcast, but they might just have a friend that needs to hear what they've gone through and be able to share that. They might have a daughter or another family member or just some random person that you meet in life that, you know what, I needed to hear that. So everybody does have a story to share and to tell. And I think by women like us, and, not just in our book, but in other places, whether they're speaking or writing, it gives that opportunity to share and, your own story and just touch somebody's life, honestly.
Well, and that's when I think about the Unbreakable program, the whole thing, it was all about helping people see other people from a place of true authenticity. I feel like in today's world, we're all at this place like that we have to have a facade. We've got to have the masks on. We've got to show up, or maybe certain things are compromised, right? Or maybe if I don't show up perfect and like this is this and this, then am I less valuable to whatever it is? And so we've come to this place in a society and in a culture that has said, nobody cares what you've been through. And you've got to take care of yourself and just, suck it up, buttercup, like get over it. But we weren't given the tools in our generation. We weren't given the tools to learn how to suck it up. So we suppressed and suppressed and suppressed to where places right now, I mean, I have done a lot of work in the Unbreakable program of learning, okay, this is why people have midlife crises. Like, this is why people come to this place, because when we suppress for so long, there's only so much energy capacity within us to hold those things down before they erupt like a volcano. And so learning special techniques to kind of offload things or think about it from a different place. I love how you talked in your story about all these different events. And on the Unbreakable Life Journey, what we talk about is defining moments. And when I look at your story, it was full of defining moments. Yeah. What do I do with this moment? And most of our defining moments that we come to, we make a decision based on the information that we have in that moment, right? The best decision that we're capable of making, hopefully, not always. But we make a decision based on that moment, and then we leave it and we move on. When we write it out, or we get it out of ourselves, or we share it with somebody else, a lot of times it's almost like we're reinvestigating that story, and we can find out, like, did that defining moment really define me in this way? And do I still want to keep that badge of what it gave me at that stage in my life? Right. So, in your story, I know you had, and I don't want to go over all the details, but I know you had, divorce situation, you had moving school situation, you had, some identity type situations happening. Right. And at 13, 14, 15, 16, in our identity forming years, that speaks differently to us than when we're in our 30s and 40s and we can see things from a different lens. It's like we were given this cool lens cleaner. Yes. And we can see things from a new place. Yeah, right?
Very much.
So in that process of writing and in that process of just taking a new look at your story, I know it had to have been healing. I know there had to be some places in it where you're like, does that name still serve me? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, very true. Just in putting it all together, number one, it made me look at it. And when I reread what I wrote, I was like, wow, that's a lot of stuff, for a young girl / young woman to go through. So, really talking from the age of being born through my college years and post-college and my first marriage of, kind of the pieces part, right? It's after that spawns kind of the shift and the change in mindset. Right. But looking at all of that, I was like, you know what? I've never really pieced it all together. I've never really sat down and gone like, okay, well, this happened and this happened and this happened to me, because I've just, again, you compartmentalize it, you tuck it in, you pack it away. You don't really talk about these things. And so that was a big reveal for me, just to see it all sequentially lined up, and going like, wow, that's a lot. That's a heavy load to carry. Sure. And sometimes like, well, no wonder I was so messed up, no wonder I was making these decisions and, just kind of choosing the safe pathway in certain moments and, making the wrong choices in certain moments. And, but then getting to the point where I noticed and I can read the shift and I'm like, that's when it was.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was honestly when I was married the first time and I had a miscarriage. because that spawned in me, the idea to reconnect with my dad, because it started bringing up all these feelings and emotions of, like if I would have had a child, this child would have a grandparent out there that he or she wouldn't know. And even though I had the miscarriage, it was still that lingering thought of like, well, I don't know my dad.
Right.
Like, who is this person? And I didn't have like a fairy tale kind of scenario attached to it. It was just like, I just want to know who he is. I want to know from his perspective what happened and what his feelings or not feelings are about it. At that point, I didn't know. I had no idea what I was in for. And it turned out to be such a beautiful connection.
Wow.
And we did build a relationship, and he's unfortunately passed a few years ago, but I can say, like, I took the steps to get to know him. I reached out, I shared any emotion, any feeling, asked any question that I had on my mind, and he got to do the same. He got to know my current husband, John, and it was kind of cute because he kind of got to play that dad role that I think he missed out on, and saying things to John like, "Will you treat her good?" And it was it was silly almost, but it was cute to watch. But also in that moment when I had the miscarriage, it made me realize, like, this person that I'm married to, is this it?
Sure.
And there was no major like event or anything that happened. We just, first of all, we probably should have never gotten married in the first place. We both had a lot of baggage, a lot of pieces, and we just had a lot of trauma and a lot of hurt. And that trauma loop was just a cycle that we lived in.
Right.
And we had to get out of it. And, I certainly have no ill will. I've always told everybody, I wish him well. I hope he's happy. I don't know anything about him at this point, but, and I hope that he wished the same for me. But that was kind of the defining moment of breaking free of, and just saying, like, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. This is not how I'm supposed to be living. This is not where I'm supposed to be.
Right.
And then I can start to see, doesn't mean that I'm healed and that I still don't have a lot of stuff to work through and deal with and encounter in the upcoming years. But it was just that shift of like, that this is not where I'm going to stay. Like, I am not going to be the status quo. I'm moving forward. And that's where the switch really flipped, and I just started changing my perspective on everything.
I think, I love sharing stories about paradigm shifts because I think sometimes, we see things from one dimensional approach, and sometimes it literally takes a fork in the road or a knee-jerking situation. Like, I can't imagine, I don't know what it feels like, and I can't imagine how painful it would be to have a miscarriage. I have situations in my life that were incredibly painful on their own accord, right? Because we literally walk through the pain journey that we were designed for to take us where we're going. Quite honestly, it's how I look at it. And it came to be true in you, right? That painful moment ignited something in you that you wouldn't have considered otherwise or even woken up to. One of the painful moments, I had a career painful moment. And in that career painful moment, and I talk about this in a different book that I'm working on, Boat Burning. And I talk about a moment where I had a vision of an elephant's graveyard. And so weird to say it out loud, but it literally, I saw a vision of an elephant's graveyard. And I realized that that was me. Like, I was walking towards a graveyard experience because I was so stuck in this place that I was seeing failure. I was seeing non-progress. I was seeing things that were so painful. And that was my knee-jerk reaction that I needed to get to purpose, because without getting to purpose, I'd be okay. I'd be okay living in status quo. I was making good money at the job that I was at. I was surviving, in all general purposes, everything was okay. On paper, everything was great.
Yeah.
But when it's not purpose, you're in a graveyard, And so anyway, that was one of those moments for me. But I think we all get to those places. But I want to spend some time talking about the encounter with your dad, because I think so many times in our life, I mean, ladies, gentlemen, like, it's hard enough to process our own stuff. And so many times we judge how somebody else dealt with or is dealing with a situation based on our viewpoint, based on our programming stuff, that we never actually come to the place like you did with great bravery to go to your dad and say, I got to know.
Mm.
How hard and how rewarding was that?
Hard. I don't know that it was hard. I fortunately my way in was kind of easy because his mom, my grandma, and my aunt Nancy had always kind of kept in touch with me via letters and stuff. I have not spoken to them, but just letters and cards and things like that. So
Sure.
my decision was I'm going to write a letter to my aunt Nancy and I just said, "Hey, like this is what's happening in my life. I I think I would like to meet my dad. I don't know if he's in a place that he wants that back. If so, here's my number. He can write like
Yeah.
whatever works for him." And I just kind of put it out there. I kid you not, like a week later, the phone rings and I pick up the phone and all I hear is, "Hi, Carrie, it's your dad."
Wow.
And my heart, just that feeling of like, oh, not dread, but just like, oh my gosh, did I just set this in motion? Right.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I didn't know
What to expect.
Well, and it was a point where I was not in control of what was happening.
Yeah, he
Like
called
I
you.
didn't pick up the phone, and I
Yeah.
kind of expected, I think when I built it in my head, I was thinking like a couple of letters back and forth, and then maybe
Sure.
we'll like plan to meet each other. So I was not ready for that phone call. But he certainly was,
Yeah.
and he was what I learned later is, he was so excited and so happy when he got that news that I wanted to reach out to him, that he just couldn't help but pick up the phone. So I mean, the first conversation was very brief, mostly because I was at a loss for words, and I was just like,
I expected
yeah.
letters. Yeah.
But we did meet in person shortly
Wow.
thereafter. I was still living kind of 3 hours from where I grew up, so I made a trip kind of back home, and got to meet him in person, and
Yeah.
it was one of those moments that I was so happy and so scared and so just overwhelmed. And it's funny because, if you see my mom and I, like we look so much alike. And I've been
Okay.
told my whole life, gosh, you look so much like your mom. But then when I walked in and I saw my dad,
You're like,
I
my twin.
I was like, oh,
Wow.
okay.
Wow.
Especially kind of this mid face area.
Wow.
It was just it was like looking in a mirror, and it was
Wow.
like, how can I look so much like my mom but walk in a room and also look so much like this man? And it
Yeah.
was uncanny. And
Mm.
he's just the softest, sweetest, simple man and soul, and it's not what I was expecting at all. I mean, I really knew nothing of him, and even what my mom could tell me, she knew him years ago, so she didn't
Sure.
know who he was. The only thing that I knew was her version of who he was and what had happened in their marriage.
Okay.
And that's not necessarily wrong.
Sure. But it was
You
her
know,
reality
and
yeah.
it probably is who he was at the time. But it just led me to not expect who he really was in person when I got to meet him. He had remarried. He had been remarried for quite some time. I do have a half sister who haven't met yet. We're friends on Facebook.
Aw.
It's one of those, I didn't want to come into this and be like, "Hey, I'm your big sister."
Sure.
I have enough respect for that life that he built with his wife and his daughter. I don't want to come in and cause this scene, I guess, for lack of a better word. So, I just kind of laid it out there. If she ever wants to meet me, I'm here for it. I'm happy to just have a conversation. I'm happy to go there and meet in person, whatever she would like to do. And if she doesn't, that's fine too, right?
Sure.
But I'm happy that I think she was okay, and definitely his wife was okay, and very encouraging of him meeting me and us, growing that relationship. So,
I love that.
yeah, I mean, it was just a very cool moment. And, he got to meet John, and we've just developed this relationship. And so now, again, I'm very close, like with my grandma,
Right.
who is still alive, and his sister, my aunt. And, it's just been really, really lovely.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think one of the words that you used a couple times just now is expectation. And I think so many times in our lives, again, based on our value system or our beliefs or decisions that we made or that others made for us or whatever, we build expectations.
Mhm.
And that can be a very dangerous thing to build in people. As parents, Royal and I, we have 3 kiddos, and we have as parents, you're like, I have expectations of what it's going to look like. You're like walking the kids down the aisle
Yeah.
and doing these things. And then quickly you learn in life that they are their own humans and what you may had for an expectation of somebody, rightfully or not,
Mhm.
many times it can be disappointing, right?
Right.
And so, I love that we can open up this conversation around expectations, because I think, at the end of the day, a lot of times one of the struggles that we deal with as humans is that our expectations are based on our programming, the way we grew and all that. And somebody else's reality doesn't always meet our expectations. And how do
Yeah.
we handle that? And how do
Mhm.
we love that relationship and honor that relationship, even if it wasn't what we thought?
Right. Yeah. I also, if you've read again in the book, I do mention this, is that my mom did get remarried when I was 8. And so that dad, we'll call him dad number 2, did adopt me. So that's where the whole name change and identity crisis kind of came into play. But he essentially became my dad and raised me. And then he and my mom got divorced when I was in college. And, fast forward a couple of years, I was still in touch with him. He got remarried again. Um, and then I was getting ready to get married. And, I had this conversation with my mom. I want you and dad, because he was my
That
dad
was
at the
dad.
time. That's who I
Yeah.
called dad.
Yeah.
I would like both of you to walk me down the aisle. Are you okay with that? And my mom was like, absolutely. This is your day. This has nothing to do with me or my feelings. I have no ill will. Like, we're adults. We can do this. Um, so then I called my dad, and, I said the same thing to him. And he said to me, Carrie, I'm not sure if I'm coming to your wedding. And I can honestly say those were the last words that he has ever spoken to me and that I've ever heard from him.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
but what I got from that relationship, yes. Was I heartbroken? Yes. Was it maddening? Absolutely. It stirred up some anger in his siblings as well. But you know what? His entire family, my aunts and uncles, my grandma, all came to my wedding. His entire family is still a very huge part of my life. I got blessed with all of these cousins, and now like second cousins or third cousin, cousins
Sure.
having kids and those kids having kids. I got blessed with this big family that is still my family and will always be my family. And so, there's good that come even out of the bad situations.
Yeah.
And it's weird. I mean, even when I show up to these family reunions, it's like, is he going to be there? Is he not going to be there? And he's usually not there, which is kind of its own weird situation. But I just walk in knowing like I am supposed to be here.
Yeah.
They want
Yeah.
me here.
Right.
They love me. They accepted me as an 8-year-old little girl coming into the family. I kind of came in as the oldest cousin, which
Aw.
was also weird,
Yeah.
having my mom was an only child as well. So I wasn't used to
The
this
huge.
big family situation, but I embraced it and I grew to love it. And it, again, just another blessing that came out of a not so great situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe he'll find his pieces to purpose story
I
and
hope
and
so.
dissect some pieces in his life, that because decisions that we make, I feel like, while they can be heartbreaking to other people, it's rooted in something.
Of course.
And it's hard, it's hard to see, especially when we're on the receiving end of that. It's like,
Yeah.
again, I can't imagine how that must feel.
Yeah.
My parents got divorced before I was born, and I lived with my mom for like minutes, I feel like, and then lived with my dad and my stepmom, Kim, who are my parents. They raised me. And then got introduced to the other side of my family at 13 years old. So a lot of similarities in just kind of the age and the timing of things that happened in our lives. And, ended up all of a sudden having a bigger family that I knew nobody in. And, there's the awe and the wonder and all of those things that go along with that. And then a few years later, that family was chopped in half. And, you don't know. And so there's reasons I think that we kind of roll with the punches, and reasons that we bury things and tuck them. But for our own health and our safety and our ability to not pass those things potentially to the next generation of either natural children or people that we influence, because we're all influencing somebody.
Right.
It is important that that we deal with those things and pick them up every once in a while and say, I see you, little defining moment over there.
Yeah.
Do you still have the same power over me that maybe you needed to have when I was 13, that power of preservation and protection? Do you still need that power over me today? Or can I say, adios, move on, and now I can take on the next leg of my journey?
Yeah. And forgiveness is a huge part of that as well, and I think I realized when writing all of that, I did realize how much forgiveness I had kind of always, I guess, naturally had in my heart.
Sure.
Because I didn't have any grudges. I didn't have any like unfinished business, so to speak, when I was writing this.
That's great.
I just kind of knew, like, okay, I forgave that situation and I moved on from it. And then look what happened. Look what evolved from it. Both dad scenarios, the sexual assault that happened in college, it did it affect me? Sure it did. Did I pack it away? Sure I did. One of the things that happened after the book came out is my big sister in my sorority, she called me and she was like, hey, do you have a minute? I was like, yeah. And she answered the phone when I called, and she just started talking about reading the chapter, and she started crying, and she goes, Carrie, like, I had no idea about any of this stuff, let alone the stuff that happened to you in college.
Right.
She's like, why didn't you never talk about it? And I said, I think we do that, it just becomes part of who you are, and you're like, there's no point in talking about it. Like, what are we going to do about it? It happened, it's just part of who I am.
Yeah.
But now I see the point in talking about it, right? Because so many people, I think, have similar stories, and there's something that people can latch onto. I certainly hope that nobody has kind of the same exact story that I have with all the different pieces, but I know for sure that there are people out there that have experienced one thing or the other along the way. And just, again, just putting that out there and giving somebody, if what I say or what I write at any point reaches one person and gives somebody a glimmer of like, oh gosh, I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
Because I certainly thought that was part of that, going through all of those things. I was like,
what's wrong with
nobody,
me?
Nobody else is going through this. Like, why is this happening to me? Why am I the only one that has all this weird stuff to have to deal with? And as you start to open up and talk about it and share it, you realize, oh man, I wish I would have done that earlier.
Well, and I think, something that's great to acknowledge is that we all heal differently. Some people, one of my children went through just a terrible situation in life. And one of her immediate responses was to tell people about it. And, and that's how she started her healing journey. And that's okay. Mine was definitely not that, but it could have also have been because of the way the event happened, or the shame that I felt because of it, or because of the programming that we received that said, don't tell anybody. Like, I literally came from a time where you just don't talk about certain things in certain ways. Right. And so, but the healing journey is unique to everybody. I think also one thing that I would like to note in your story prophetically a little bit, is that, when we go through things, we're building muscle. It's called empathy. And when you've had to go through so many different unique things, it's probably because God is using you to speak light and love into people with so many different things. Sometimes we're positioned to speak to one group, right? So if in my situation, sexual violence was the thing, then perhaps I wouldn't have gone through some of the other things I went through to have the empathy muscle to reach people in other lanes, right? And so in your situation, I was speaking to a group earlier today, and in that group, it was a very diverse group of hairstylists. I had a privileged an opportunity to go and speak to them about a "you can do it" attitude, right? And it was a beautiful message. But in that message, I had about 20 different ladies I was speaking to, and I shared some statistics with them, statistics around sexual violence, statistics around divorce, statistics around all kinds of stuff. And the truth is that when we've built these empathy muscles, it's because we have a very specific job to do, to speak life and to be hope for those people. And so, Carrie, I feel like for you, the diversity in what you've experienced is you now have a platform to reach so many different people, where a lot of people have a very narrow grasp or a very narrow lens. You have a very broad lens, and God's going to elevate you to a very big stage to reach a lot of people. And today he's clarifying that message.
I appreciate that. It was never my goal, obviously, to be a speaker, to write a book. I didn't really know what that purpose was going towards.
Sure.
Again, if you've heard me speak, I've mentioned this multiple times, is there was a couple of years ago, a year I just decided to say yes. And I'm like, whether, it doesn't mean you have to join or you have to keep doing everything that you say yes to, but say yes to the opportunities that are put in front of you.
Right.
And there were so many things. 2022, 23 was kind of that time frame when I just said yes. Like when Casey called me and she was like, I want to do this in Austin, Texas. Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't fully know what I was saying yes to.
Right.
But I knew Casey and I trusted her and I knew what she was doing in Charlotte. And so I was an immediate yes. Saying yes to just going to meet somebody for coffee, or meeting for a business luncheon, or going to a new networking group that I'd never been to before. Being asked to write the book. I was like, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, do I really want to do that?
Oh. Well, and you wrote it in the middle of a busy, big, like you guys were, you had some stuff on your plate.
Yes.
But even then, even in the midst of that, so many times I think we say, no, not now. But, and one of my favorite quotes is, if not you, then who? If not this, then what?
Yep.
And if not now, then when? Like, when are you going to use all of this experience, joy, wisdom that you have within you? When are you going to use it to bless other people? When? And what is the platform?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And where are the people? Like we talked about that at the beginning. Community is one step before purpose in our 7 pillars. Now, I'm not saying that's the way it always has to be, but it's the way that God showed me when I created Unbreakable, was that it's right before purpose, because sometimes our purpose is attached to pleasure. Yay. Like I love having fun, right? Most of the time it's attached to pain, because that's the one thing that's usually going to get us moving. But it's always attached to people. And without community, you're not going to find the people.
Right.
You're not going to find the people that you're supposed to inspire, to speak to rub elbows with, or to learn from, so that you can see how they are walking in purpose and you can pick up your pieces and go on that ship as well.
Yeah. I had no idea when I said yes to this chapter what doors it would open up. I really had no clue. I was just like, yeah, I'm going to do this and I'm going to get my story out there. And as we started writing, and as I kind of started talking to the other authors and people who had written in the books before, just the opportunities that come your way, I'm like, okay, if somebody asks me to share about the book, I'll do that, But I will tell you, a pivotal moment was speaking at the Unbreakable conference. And a friend of mine, Mickey Graham, said to me, because she was there, when I got off the stage, she was like, Carrie, you came alive the minute that you put that microphone in your hand. And she was like, this is what you need to be doing.
Yeah.
And I've had multiple people say that to me. And I do not plan what I'm going to say. I think, I kind of freaked Vidya out a little bit when she asked me, are you ready, for your talk? And I was like, yeah, I don't prepare anything. I just kind of get up there and start talking. And I think she was like,
yeah. Well, she didn't come to Unbreakable.
Yeah. But I mean, that's just how I operate. That's kind of how I've always done things, like when it comes to writing a paper, I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to vomit all this out. And that's honestly how I put the chapter together.
I have a question for you. If you can be that good without preparation, what could you do with it?
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Because you are good.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
You are.
I would imagine if I'm given in a situation where I have a longer time to talk, I probably would kind of map it out a little more.
Yeah.
I just feel like I have so much to say that it's easy for me to fill up time. But yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, I definitely look forward to, kind of more streamlined talks.
Well, get ready.
Yeah.
I literally believe, so many times I'm a big visual person. I never thought that I was a visionary type person, only because I wasn't in the right element. And when you finally get into the right element and into the right scenario, it's like, boom, I see it. Like this building that we're sitting in right now. It's so funny. My husband, we bought it in 2016. I think it was 2016, might have been 2014. Anyway, we were coming from the storage place that was already a built to suite kind of office place. And of course, I'm from banking, so everything has to be clean. And, Royal's like, we build chimneys. I don't know why you think it has to be clean. But anyway, I digress. We walk into this building and Royal's in his element. And he says, I see it. I can see it. And I'm like, I don't know what you see besides dust on the floor and cobwebs on all of those doors. And he goes, no, Teresa, I see it. When you're in your element and you're in the place that you're supposed, the vision can become real. Right. And so when you are in this place, you will start to see, Carrie, you will see the stages. You will see beyond. As soon as somebody asks you something, you will already see the person in the audience whose life is going to be changed because of the words of hope that you speak to them. That's what I want you to see. And that's the vision I believe God has for you. And he can trust you because you said yes. And that is what I want to say, that whole scenario that you've spoken about many times of the importance of saying yes. Sometimes my elephant graveyard experience, I didn't have to be in the graveyard. I said no too long. For too long, I said, no, banking is my thing. And I thought, well, God put me in here. I was 19 years old when I started my banking career. I didn't have any college experience. I didn't go to college. I was pregnant when I started with the bank. So I was so grateful for that position that I let my gratitude and identity around a role hold me hostage to a situation that I was no longer serving anymore, right? I was okay. I talked about this earlier, but I was saying no too long. And until I said yes, I couldn't see what the future looked like. And so you're so wise to say yes. And you were so wise to take a risk on yourself. Like it's not easy because you probably had to weigh, do I have the time and the energy and the capacity to write a chapter in this book, which I don't know what it's going to do to me. I don't know what it's going to look like. Or do I need to be super focused on this huge career situation I'm dealing with right now? Because that was a big deal.
Yeah.
A big deal that you put a lot of time and energy into, right? But you found a way. And because this is part of your future, God gave you the energy to do both.
Yeah. I think I had said yes to the book and then this career business change. Not necessarily a change in my role, but I will say more of an expanded role. and just a lot of things happening at the end of last year. And that's when we were writing the chapter.
That's
so
when
I
it
was
was
like,
really
of
hitting you.
course, this is all happening right now. Yeah.
Well, you know, the word says that when the seed is sown, the enemy comes with persecution, affliction, and cares of this world to steal the word.
Mm-hmm.
And so, not that that was a thing of the enemy, but a lot of times when we step into purpose or into power, adversity comes, and we just dig in and get that muscle back into place and push through anyway. Because it's not about this moment right now; it's about tomorrow.
Yeah.
And who you're going to serve.
Yeah. It's about, building discipline and building, honoring what is being put in front of you and what is being downloaded in you. Right. And that's just, I think I've always naturally kind of been like that, just seizing opportunities. Not always in the right direction. But certainly more recently, it was just like, you know what, I have to do this, and I feel like I've had so many people say like, that is such a great, I'm going to do that. The podcast that I did yesterday, as soon as we ended, she sent me a text and she goes, you know what, I just said yes to an event coming up this weekend that I was pondering about, like really not going to. And I just said yes to it after our podcast.
You're going to create a movement of just say yes.
Well, and my husband John told me yesterday, I didn't know this, but apparently Richard Branson this was kind of his line, was just say yes and figure out the details later. So I've been, just say yes has been kind of what I've been sharing with people. Apparently it already existed, but but that's what I'm saying is,
but it didn't exist for your audience.
Correct.
And that's the thing. It doesn't matter if somebody else is, and here's, we were at this event Friday. Again, we spoke about that earlier. There's a lot of people, once you start rising to purpose, you're going to find that there are a lot of people that are doing the thing that you're doing. But this is your piece and what you're going to bring to it, the flair that you bring, the savvy that you bring to the table, right, is yours. And all of the energy and the things that you do, they're yours. And that's going to be your piece of it, because there are certain people that are never going to go to that event. They're never going to go to that stage. They may never go to that church or whatever the place is, but God's going to align it because you said yes. They're going to be around you, and you're going to be the tool that he uses to change their life and to speak hope and life and love to them. And so I think that's amazing, because there are a lot of people that, you start walking towards purpose. You find your community, you dig deep, you figure it out, and you're like, yes, I'm going to do this thing, right? And then you look up and you're like, oh my God, everybody's driving the same car. Like, you know what I mean? And you start seeing that because you've elevated to a new level. And now those are your people. Like, those are like your peers. We have to be so careful that we don't look at them as competition, but people that are in the same mode, the same charge, that are, on the same mission. And you just get to lock arms and you get to serve your bucket and they get to serve theirs. And together you change lives.
Yes. I mean, we all get to lift each other up. And the thing that I love about what I've built and what I continue to build is I am locking arms with you, with Kelly, with Networking Boss Babes, with TWIB, there's all these different organizations, and we all have so much in common, yet we're different and we're serving different purposes, and we're speaking different things, and we're sharing different ideas. But why not go on this journey together?
Right.
I've never understood the competition between women. I've just, in sports, heck yes. Like,
sure.
Put me in a competitive situation. Absolutely. I'm a competitive person.
Right.
But just the nature of competitiveness amongst women, whether it's, you drive a better this, or live in a better this, or have a better job, or a better whatever.
Right.
It never really made sense to me. And I'm like, why are we not just all working together for the collective of the common good, and to really rise together and lift each other up? And I've just always been that person that, trying to do that and trying to be a connector of people. That's just always come very, very naturally to me. You meet somebody and I'm like, oh, you know what? You need to meet this person. Like you guys would really like connect, or this would be a great customer for you, or your two businesses could be great referrals for each other. And that's just, without anything in return. It's just something that's always, I don't know, just kind of been a part of me. And so that's just continually evolving into what I'm doing, whether it's, in my professional life or Ladies Lifestyle Network or,
Mhm.
in writing this book and connecting people together. And I'm just finding all these outlets and all these resources now that, are just being revealed to me that I probably never would have seen before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so good. And you're working with the right people. Like I loved Kelly's message that she shared last Friday when she talked about the importance of the people that we spend time with. I want to be sitting at the feet of people that are 2 degrees higher, or even the ones that are running in the same race with me, because they have the right heart set and the right mindset. And I use heart set and mindset as two different things, because you can have the right mindset with a hard heart, right? And you can have the great heart, but a hurt mind. And so I want both. I want to be working with people in that space. And I think it's beautiful to see the work that everybody's doing together. As we kind of wrap up today, what piece, I mean, I know we've got the just say yes, and that could truly be like the advice that you give. But what would you say truly to somebody? Because this is a special announcement. We literally, I just got off the phone with Michelle with Sulet Press today, and we will have a Pieces to Purpose Volume 2.
Ooh.
So we are so excited about that. It is just so in line with the unbreakable journey for women to be able to take those pieces or those defining moments in life and help them on their journey to purpose. But if somebody were watching this and they're like, I missed that first book, but maybe I could do the second one, what would you say to them?
Believe in yourself, number one, that you have the capacity to do all things and anything. And don't be afraid. I mean, I think so much of life, and particularly women, just live a lot of fear, right? There's a lot of fear behind, like, oh, I don't know if I should do that. How's that going to look? What's that going to say about me?
What's it going to cost?
Yes.
Like emotionally, mental, like all the things, right?
100%. I mean, just for me personally writing that, I went through like, what's this going to do? What kind of questions am I going to have to field once this is out there in the world?
Sure.
And it was a very, I've said this before, is, I hit send for the rough draft for the first draft. And then I called Meg and I was like, oh my God, I'm literally going to throw up. I was like, I don't know about this,
Yeah.
And she was like, yep, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
She's like, it's going to be okay. Like, you said yes for a reason.
Right.
And this story is supposed to be out there. And from that point, I'm just like, whatever comes my way. I mean, it's all my past anyway, that mostly what I was sharing. It's going to be new to most people, even my mom, while she knew the timeline and the journey, I don't think she really ever read or understood my feelings behind it. So I knew, there's going to be some conversations. And even with John reading it, I'm like, he knows all of these things.
But it's different when you put it on paper, because now you're telling it from a different place. Like it really is different.
It's a heart story instead of just a chronological story or a fact.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had shared my story many times from the stage before I wrote a chapter about it. And there was a difference in writing the chapter, because I literally had to put myself back in the bedroom, and I had to put myself back into, being 13 years old, and into the feelings that I felt when I was afraid of being the one that everybody talked about, or I was afraid of, if mom and dad find out, they'll like yank me back. And I don't know that I'm done having a relationship with my mom here. Like, all of those fears that I had at that age. When you're telling it from a healed place, a lot of times you forget those feelings. I feel like, God gives us two really good gifts. One is wisdom that comes from experience. The other one is memory. And a lot of times we allow wisdom and experience to take the whole show, and we forget about the memory and those feelings that you felt in that process. And sometimes writing it out allows you to relive those, and almost to have a new level of grace or empathy for yourself in that process, and to say, oh, sweet little little Teresa. I'm still little. Sweet little Teresa at 13 years old. I
Yeah.
see you. I love you. And nobody's really going to judge you. You don't have to hold on to that fear. You know?
It's very true. Very true. I think, you can look at it and just honor the journey that you've been on, and just take a good look at it and realize like, this is what got me to where I am right now.
Mhm.
This is what shaped who I am right now.
And I love who I am.
Yes.
Right now.
And that's the point. If you can look at it, and do I still have work to do and places to go? Absolutely. I'm not done. But it gave me that space to really look at myself and go, you know what? Good job.
I'm proud of me.
Yes. And I don't think people oftentimes give themselves the grace and the space to do that and to give themselves their own accolades.
Right.
It's okay to do that.
Right.
Don't become
100%.
boastful and egotistical about it, but it's okay to go, man, that was tough.
Yeah.
That was really hard to go through.
Yeah.
And I survived and I made it. Yeah. And here I am.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm doing now.
That's what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And I think, again, when you do that, I also found a super huge amount of empathy for other people as I started going through my healing journey and realizing the little quirky pieces about my life that have made me exactly who I am. It was very easy to then go back and say, okay, I wonder what, now I'm not psychoanalyzing anybody, but I wonder what I'm not seeing in this situation with that person.
Yeah.
And maybe I just need to back up, or maybe they just need a hug, or maybe, I need to pray a minute and find out if this is even a place that I'm supposed to be, or a conversation I'm supposed to be in. Yeah. Because sometimes we are just so quick to problem solve, to jump in, to do the thing. We can sometimes do more damage than good. Right.
Absolutely.
And when we can see that through the healing journey for ourselves, we can also help others through it as well. So, girl, I feel like we could talk all day.
I know. We could make this a 5-hour podcast,
which would be so fun. We just chop it up and repurpose all the things. But I'm so grateful for your friendship and so grateful for the light you shine.
Same. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for doing this. This is fabulous.
Oh,
I love what you're doing with Unbreakable, and I'll be there right there lockstep with you.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, friends, thank you for joining us today on Storytime. I know that today's message must have lit something in you as Carrie shared her journey and all of the experiences along the way. And our hope and prayer is that you take these little bits of these Storytime series and you start looking at your life from the lens of, I wonder if that's maybe what I'm feeling or seeing. And I wonder if that could be my road to recovery or healing, or maybe that's the purpose that was waiting around the corner. So whatever it is you get, we want to say thank you for joining us. Thank you for being on this journey with us. And until we see you again, have an unbreakable life.